with knives. So it's not just with a knife that the issue with a davar charif, Susie, in my office is volume 4 above my desk. It's good if you look inside, okay? So we're on page 166, cooking a davar charif like onions in a meat or dairy pot. So we learned last week that if you cut with a knife, even if it's an Eino Ben Yomo knife, previously we learned that an Eino Ben Yomo, anything beyond 24 hours, it's noisen dam livgam, and there's no real transfer of any flavor. The only exception is when we use a knife on a davar charif. Then there's a concept of machaya lishvach, that it sort of resurrects the flavor that was in there. And if it's meat, if it's a meat knife, it will make the onions fleshik, and if it's a dairy knife, it'll make the onions milachik, and therefore cooking it with the opposite food would be a problem. So, and in the rest of the shir, we will focus mainly on the case of a davar charif cut by a knife. We should note that a davar charif, even if not cut by a dairy or meat knife, cooked in a dairy or meat pot, because remember, with heat, you're going to have the transfer. With a knife, we're talking about even a cold knife. That's the chiddush with a davar charif. That, remember, Nati asked me last week, if you take a cold knife and you cut a piece of meat that's cold, there's no transfer. The knife does not become a milachtik knife. All you got to do is wash it off. You do hadacha of the steak. For example, if you used a milk knife on a piece of raw meat, it's both cold. The duchket the sakina doesn't work alone. It's got to be duchket the sakina with a davar charif. Steak is not a davar charif, so there's no bliya, there's no transfer. But for example, if you heat, if you have onions in a dairy pot being cooked or in a meat pot, so the davar charif, even if it's eino ben yomo, it'll be machaya l'shvach, and the onions will get that, whatever that is, whether it's meat or dairy.
Does it matter? Does it matter that it have to be pure onions, or what if the onions were like a portion? Let's say you're blending onions into
onions. That's going to be a davar charif, even if it's as part of your dish.
You're blending the onions into something larger. So let's say you have a bunch of tomatoes, not davar charif.
So if you're going to have shishim against the onions, we'll see it's not going to be a problem. You need shishim. You need a lot.
Yeah.
We'll see that. So, but what we've done tonight is we've also realized that it's not just a knife. A knife works because of duchket sakina and the davar charif. But if you put a davar charif in a pot and you put heat on it, so then we'll also have the status of the pot, even if the pot is not ben yomo. Right? All along we've been learning if the pot is beyond 24 hours, it doesn't really transfer flavor. But that's a problem here, because if you put a davar charif in it, if it's eino ben yomo, it'll transfer it to the onions. The Ramah says it very clearly. Avalim haya davar charif kagon shebishlu dvarim charifin b'kli shel bos. Right? He says if you cook onions in a meat pot, afil ben yomo, o shedachu tavlin b'madoch shel bosser, or you took spices in a mortar and pestle, but by grinding it, it's pressure. In bishlu b'chalav, right? If you cook those spices you had grounded it in a meat pestle, and you cook the spices in davar chalav, oitzer afilu b'di'evet. Adi keshishim neged abasra below, unless you have 60 in the tomatoes or the potatoes or whatever you're cooking, those like chayim asked, whatever you're cooking. If you have shishim neged that amount, that'll be okay. Now, when we say that the davar charif absorbs, how much does it absorb? So it's clear from the discussion so far that when cutting with a davar charif with a knife, let's say you cut an onion with a meat knife, even if it's eino ben yomo, some element of taste is transferred from the knife into the davar charif as a result of the sharpness. And of course, the davar charif that draws it out. But we must determine the extent of that transfer. So, for example, you have a whole onion. You cut the onion in half. Does the whole onion become milach fleshik? No. In the case of cooking food in a meat or dairy pot, We have seen previously that the flavor from the pot is absorbed throughout the entire food. But regarding davar charif, we shown in dispute just how much is absorbed. There are three possible. One is the entire food, the whole onion. Two, kedei natila, which is the thickness of a thumb, 2 centimeters, which means if you cut an onion in two, and you used a meat knife, and now you want to cook that onion with dairy, so you just cut away 2 centimeters of the onion, and you can use the rest of the onion. It doesn't aser kula. It only asers kedei natila. Third, it could be
what kind of knife you use to cut that slice out?
No, we're saying if you used an Eno Ben Yomo meat knife and you cut a cold onion, we've learned now that the sharpness of the knife, the davar charif, transfers the meat flavor into the onion. The question is how much into the onion. So one shita is kula, the other shita is kedei natila, the third shita is kedei klipa, which is just you take a little razor blade and you cut the whole face of the onion, and the rest of the onion would be okay. The Ran cites the Ravid, who holds that a kedei natila is absorbed, and then cites the Rashba, who says that the entire food is affected. Says the Ran on the Riv in Chulin, because of Aravid Zal, Midika Omer Oser, Stoma Mashma de Lo Sagi Baklipa. For the fact that they said it's Oser, it's not enough with just taking off a klipa. Dimishum charifuto v'lachuto, because of the sharpness and the moistness. Boilev v'neser yoiser midei klipa v'tzarch netilas makom. So you need kedei netila, which is a 2 centimeter depth into the onion. You cut that away. The rest of the onion would be permitted to use with dairy. V'chein das hara'ah was another rishon. Aval harashba zal kosav lo yoav shira k'diyav b'kishus. We weren't given a shear like when we talked about cucumber. So Gorid Libi Paski Mashmadog of Churfe Balatuva Osres Kula. So the Rashba says, my heart sort of drives me to say that the whole onion is fleisha. And you wouldn't be able to use the whole onion. The Rosh offers a third opinion that it's only Osir Kedei Klipa. Tznon Mavliya Shamnunis Betochu Osir Ai Kedei Klipa. That when you cut with a knife which has shamnunis on it, which we said they all have, it will transfer that meat flavor into a klipa. How does the Shulchan Aruch paskin? He rules in accordance with the opinion of the Ravid and the Ra'ah that one must cut off the thickness of a kedei natila around the location of the cut with the knife, which is about 2 centimeters. And then one may eat the rest of the food with the other type. The Ramah rules like the Rashba, that the entire food should not be used with the other type lechatchila. So for us Ashkenazim, if we cut an onion with a meat knife, the whole onion cannot be used lechatchila with a dairy product. However, b'di'eved, if it also came in contact with the other type, when they cut off the thickness of kedei natila, it should be noted that if the sharp food has already been cut up into small pieces, you can't do a kedei natila. Meaning, let's say b'di'eved, you were cooking a whole onion. There are dishes where you cook a whole onion. Or let's say you cut an onion in two. And we're Ashkenazi. And you cook the onion because you didn't know the halach, and you cooked it with dairy. When you find the onion, you can cut away kedei klipa, and then you're fine. B'di'eved, according to the Ramah. Kedei natila. 2 centimeters worth of that onion, and you're okay. But l'chatchila, you shouldn't do it. So, but here is a very important halacha. If you cut dak, means like when we chop up onions we take an onion, we chop it up, and we're going to saute onions. We chop it up into 50 pieces. That's called dak. There you're stuck. There's no kedei natila. There's no kedei natila to be. It's all there. So that you would not be able. You would not be able to rativ. You wouldn't be able to save the dish according to the Ramah. It's kulo usher if you cut dak. That's a famous question on the test that we had. So the Shulchan Aruch says tznon o silka. If you have a radish or a beet, Shechotchan b'sakin shel basar ben yomo. You cut with a ben yomo knife. O she'enu mekunach, or there was be'en meat on the knife, wasn't clean. Asr la'achlan b'chalav, ad she'yitol mimokam ha'chatach kedei netil smokum. You have to remove an atila of that food before you cook it with the opposite food. Shehu ka'ove edzba, like the thickness of your fingernail. O she'yitamenu v'lo yebetam basar. The Shulchan Aruch, as opposed to Ramah, allows you to taste it. To see whether you can taste it. We Ashkenazim don't follow that. Sha'az mutter badach.
Ernie,
yes.
if you go to a fish store and you want to buy a piece of salmon, it's not necessarily a kosher fish store. We learned it. I think I learned it with you, that if they have a knife that they've used a tray of fish prior to that, then you could use it, but you take off a little bit of the meat. Isn't that correct?
Same din, exactly the same din that we've learned regarding it's called the duchket the sakina now.
Yeah.
And you would be okay with kidei kli. Remember, a fish that's cold, you're not going to have any transfer of glia by that knife. Okay, but the shamnun is, so we're not sure if it was clean. So you would, because we're not sure that it's a clean knife, you would have to go l'chumra and certainly do a kedei netila at least. We're going to get into kosher fish tonight. We'll see. The Ramah says, Yesh Omri, Shimchatach Tznon B'Sakin Shel Isser. Right now we're talking, let's say it's a tray, let's say it's a knife that you bought from a goy, so there's a tray of blia in that knife, not basar or meat, not milk or meat. Kulo Usser. So some say it's all, the whole onion is Usser. The same din will apply either to transferring the meat flavor or the milk flavor. That's the Ramah quoting the Rashba, which we said is kulo, not kedei klipa, not kedei natila, but it's kulo. And that's whether it's an isser dika flavor or meat or milk flavor. Like we said, if b'di'evet you find the onion, you can take the natila off and you can eat it. That's if you cut the sharp part of the onion. Like if you have a scallion, right? You got the green leaf above the sharp part, ain lachush, because then you don't. There's no transfer, because it's not a dover charif. If you live in a village where the only kinds you can buy are ones that have been cut with a knife, so the minig was that you could buy it from the goyim, but you had to take an netilas makom, even though they were using, who knows what kind of knife they were using. If you remove the netila, you could use the rest of the onion. So that's where you're getting that halacha elos. Shulchan Aruch, im chotoch bo shuman, ubitzelim, ukreishin. If you cut garlic, onions, leeks, vitamcha, which is horseradish, v'kiyotzu b'hem, mitvorma charifin, uperos chamutzim, or brined fruit, v'dagim meluchim, or salted fish, dinam shava l'chatech botzno. It's the same din as a radish. Means all these dover charifim fall in the same category. Says the Ramah, mikol mokum muter lechol merkachot charifim shel of the glilim. You can eat spices that belong to goyim. You go on zangvil, cinnamon, v'kayotzubo. The yeshlem kelim yuchodim lekach otoshnosan. Usually they have special utensils for it. Now they don't use a knife that they're cutting chazer. They have special utensils, or they detach it bichlal without any utensil. So that's in the time of the Ramah. That's not that practical for us. Based on this, one should not cut a davar charif with a ben yomo non-kosher knife, or with a ben yomo meat knife, in order to eat it with dairy, or vice versa, even if the knife is clean and cold. But that's a davar charif. Yalkut Yosef confirms that this is the halacha even for Sfardim, who are in general lenient about not bar not, the second degree flavor. Because here we're talking about a second degree flavor, right? The first flavor is the meat into the knife. Now the second flavor is that flavor into the radish. So even though the Sfardim are very lenient by not bar not, snono salik, radish or beet, shechatcha b'sakin shel basar ben yomo, also la'achlu b'chalav, you can't eat them with milk, which is a finger's breadth. In cases of need where one desires that the onions or other davar charif remain parv, but only has a meat or dairy knife, one may kasher the knife to become parv in the following manner described by the Shulchan Aruch. It's called ne'itza. You stick it in the ground 10 times. So let's say you're on a camping trip, and you realize you only took a meat knife, and you have an onion that you're cutting up, but you want to cook it with dairy that you brought on your camping trip. What do? So you can do ne'itza to that meat knife, and that makes it parv. Let's see the Shulchan Aruch. Sokin yashon ben gadol ben katan hanikach me'ovid kechavim. For example, if you bought it from a goy, so there's tarfus in the knife. In boli shtamish b'tzonein. So if you want to use it for cold, imein bagumos, if there's no sharp ridges there, no atza sor pamim b'karka kosher, you can stick it in the ground 10 times. V'tzor shekol ne'itza v'ne'itza tiyeh b'karka kosher. It's got to be hard ground. Lefichach lo yinatz b'mokum shonot ne'itza acheres. It can't go back in the same area. Va'afilu lachtoch bo davar charif k'mot snon sagi b'hachi. So first he started off by saying you can cut something cold. Then he said, he adds the heter of doing it as well with something with davar charif, which will keep it neutral. Says the Ramah, this is only for a radish. I mean, technically they're saying you shouldn't do it if you're going to cook it with heat, only for davar charif. Which is a little strange, because the way we're learning, it's the bliya is the bliya. But anyways, that's the Ramah. The Sefer HaKashrut cites this message of Shulchan Aruch and notes that Rav Elyashiv offered an alternative method of achieving the same result without thrusting the knife in the ground. So first of all, when I studied Yoreh Deah, we were told that you could take steel wool and rubbing steel wool. Our mothers had that. I remember growing up. I don't see that much anymore, but people used to use steel wool to scrub their pots. Really? So if you use steel wool on the knife, that's another way of doing it. But b'shem ha'Rav Elyashiv Zatzal, shemekevan sheni'itza tzarich shetiyeh b'karka beinonis. So the Shulchan Aruch gave us a certain type of dirt that you're supposed to put it in. We're not that expert. Lo kash midai, lo rach midai, ve'ein anu yodim es hashir. Al ken ki shetzarich ne'itza, yesh l'nakosa sasakin heitev. Just clean it very well. Ula'aros alei rotchim. Boil some water, pour the boiling water on the knife. V'zeh b'mokum ha'ne'itza, says Rav Elyashiv. So if you have a meat knife and you want to use it for parv, that's the way to do it. Now, let's say you cut an onion with a fleshik knife. So we say that the onion that part of the onion became fleshik. That's why you got to cut away kedei netil if you're going to use it with milk. So what about if you then eat that onion? You have to wait 6 hours before you eat dairy. We have seen that a davar charif such as an onion has a semi-meat status if it is cut by a meat knife. Does this mean that one would also have to wait 6 hours or 3 hours or whatever your minhag is before eating dairy? According to Rav Akiva Eger, the answer is no. He bases then on a statement of the Ramah that waiting is required only where one eats actual meat, but not where the food has absorbed the tam of meat. Says the Ramah in Pei Test, if a dish only absorbed meat flavor, let's say from the walls of the pot, because it was a ben yomo pot, but there's no mamish meat in there, or in our case, where the onion absorbed a meat flavor, Says Ramah, Rakshan is Vash, you have a food, noodles, that were cooked in a Ben Yomo meat pot. It's been used within 24 hours. So it's got meat blias in it. But there's no mamashus of basar. And you cook noodles in that pot. Mutter lechol achrav gvina. You can eat cheese right after you eat those noodles. You can't eat the cheese with those noodles. That we learned. But you can eat it right after. You don't have to wait anything. And therefore, Rabbi Kiva Eger proceeds to analyze this statement and wonders, why did the Rambam have to say that? After all, the Shulchan Aruch allows eating par of food with dairy, even if it was cooked in a meat pot, right? The Ramot said we can't do that if we cooked our noodles in a meat pot. So the Shulchan Aruch said because of not bar not, you can cook it with cheese. The Ramot said lechatchila we shouldn't, but he allows you to eat it if the dairy was mixed with that food, right? If after the fact, if b'di'evet, you cook the noodles in a fleshik pot, and you didn't know, and then you mix it with cheese, you don't have to throw it out. You're allowed to eat it. So if you're allowed to eat the cheese mamish with it, why did the Ramah have to come here and tell us a din that, after you eat the noodles in a meat pot, you can eat, you don't have to wait at all? Of course you don't have to wait. The Ramah says you can eat it together with cheese if b'di'evet it happened. That's what Rabbi Kiva Eger, with his Gaonus, understood that. If so, should it be obvious that one may eat dairy after without waiting? For this reason, Rabbi Kiva interprets the statement of the Ramah as referring to a case of a davar charif. And the novelty is that even in this case, one need not wait 6 hours. Maybe you think a davar charif, because it's b'chayil l'shvach, maybe it's worse. Rabbi Kiva says, based on that Ramah, it's not worse. You don't have to wait. You don't have to eat anything. You don't have to wait at all. This is Rabbi Kiva Eger in his Agos al Hashach. So Rabbi Kiva Eger is on every daf of Shulchan Aruch. There's the Hagos of the, if you have a Shulchan Aruch with Rabbi Kiva Eger can be found, and he'll make ha'aros on the Shach and the Taz, and his halachic statements are there, just like the Bir Agra is there. So it says the Rabbi Kiva Eger, Lanias daiti near lomer afilu bishul chometz the charif b'ka'arish l'basar. If you cook vinegar, which is a davar charif, in a fleshik pot, the ein bo mishum not bar not, where we don't use the heter of not bar not because it's a davar charif. Afilu hachi mutter lachol gvina achrav. He says you can eat cheese afterwards. So that's directly from Rabbi Kiva Eger. And the Sefer HaKashrus says we follow that Rabbi Kiva Eger in practical halacha. Somebody ate a davar charif like an onion that was cut with a meat knife, or nizbashel, or was cooked in a meat pot, or nichbash, or nichbash means it was like kavush, it was pickled, it sat there for 24 hours, the kli b'sari. So av sheboleh tam basar. So even though we've learned that there's meat, lias, flavor, that have been absorbed by this food, v'dino k'maychal b'sari, we treat it fleshik, and therefore you can't cook it with milk. We don't treat it like meat. Therefore, you can eat dairy right after. On the other side, same thing. If you had a milk knife that cut onion, so
like halacha l'maaseh. So let's say, for example, Shabbos, someone prepared a salad for the Shabbos table, and then they cut the onions for the salad with a melchik knife. And you're having fleshiks, you're having chicken soup, whatever, you're having fleshiks. So you take this, after you do challah, you eat the salad, which now that salad, the onions in that salad were cut with a melchik knife, right? So what you're saying is, the question is, you couldn't put you probably would not be able to put the salad.
So Chaim, the answer to your question is right. We didn't get to say it. We said right now that if you used a meat knife, you don't have to wait for cheese. But if you cut something charif with a milk knife, some are stringent not to eat it within 6 hours after eating meat. That means if you ate meat, you shouldn't eat the salad within 6 hours of that. Some are machmir, but some are lenient. Some are lenient and don't have a problem with that.
Is it?
So it means after. So even eating, if you ate meat, there are makilim that allow you to eat that salad that's been cut with the milk knife.
Yeah,
But yesh machmirim regarding that.
right. So this is the issue where you have a lot of times you buy things, that have a hechsher on them, and they say DE, dairy equipment, right? So you're eating a food that was prepared. The food isn't itself milchik, but it was prepared in dairy equipment, right?
Correct. So we follow all of these. The same halachas apply. Everything we don't know. I don't know whether the dairy equipment is a knife or not. Remember, if it's not barnat, each case has to be analyzed independently. If you have a milchik pot chayim, but there was water in there, so you have not barnat, right? You have the first knot was the milk flavor going into the pot. The second knot is the milk flavor going in the water. And then let's say something was cooked in the water, vegetables. So now everybody holds not, 3 knots. Chulam deis is mutter to eat with whatever you want. You understand? So that's one dairy DE could be that, which is completely permitted. On the other hand, it could be if it was sli, roasted directly on the, you know what I'm saying? So we don't know what exactly the case is when you say DE. Was it cut with a knife or was it cooked? You see that there's a difference. Because if it's beyond nois and tam livgam, if it's an eno ben yomo pot, then there's no flavor at all. It wouldn't be a problem if it was DE. If it was knife, we see that there is a problem if it's eno ben yomo. You see what I'm saying, Chaim? Just getting information of DE, the one giving hashgacha is going to have to know exactly what it is we're dealing with, and then you would analyze it based on the principles we've learned so far.
Yeah.
Right?
Okay.
He says, "V'masakin eina bas yomo vaday she'efshar lahakil." And then we come back to this. Even though there's machaya l'shvach, eino ben yomo is certainly better than ben yomo. So if after the fact you want to eat meat or milk, he says if it's eino ben yomo, there's going to be no problem whatsoever in the case that you described. So due to all of the issues concerning cutting a par of food with meat or dairy knife, some poskim, such as Rav Moshe Sternbuch, right? Rav Moshe is alive today. He's the posek of the Eidach HaRedis in Yerushalayim. I've had the honor of meeting him and asking him shilas when I went on the trip with Tzvi Reisman. Moshe Sternbuch is from South Africa, speaks a perfect English, knows a lot of scientific principles. I spoke to him about DNA, which he's very familiar with. So he's a real modern day posek. In the Tshuvas Fan, he also wrote the Moadim Uzmanim. That's Rav Moshe Sternbuch and the Tshuvas Fanogos. He recommends designating specific knives as parv in order that onions or other types of davar charif are not rendered dairy or meat in any way. Says the Tshuvas Fanogos, "Ulfi zekdesh liyabol litos lahachlif near shiroi v'nochel nishtamis litznon and bom charif b'sakin parv dafka." People should designate parv knives. Achen mefurish b'mogen Avram shleish nizar l'davar charif shmishtamis bom chalab l'chatko rak b'sakin parv. Mogen Avram already said it a few hundred years ago. And there's a nice biography of Rav Sternbuch. On the other hand, those with parv dishes often encounter more potential halachic issues due to mistakenly using them or washing them improperly with either dairy or meat. One who does designate some dishes as parv should be especially careful not to use them improperly. What about cutting surfaces? Let's say you use a cutting board. Another common issue that arises with regard to davar charif pertains to the surface upon which it is cut. If the davar charif is cut upon a dairy or meat surface, such as a plate or a cutting board, does that impact upon the status of the food? According to the Chochmas Adam, the cutting surface is significant. Remember, the Chochmas Adam is the Chayei Adam, Rav Danzig. Venerally, the Imchatach Alav herring, V'onrekis chamutzim, pickles, herring and pickles. Afilu b'diavad aser. The duchke de sakina, the churfa de meliach maflit ben akli al kolpani b'mokam achata. He says if you're using a meat cutting board and you cut that's known, let's say with a parv knife, but you put pressure on the cutting board, and the meat blia in the cutting board transfers into the pickle or the herring. That's what the Chochmas Adam says. at least to the place where you cut. So therefore, you could do kedei natila and get rid of that, and then you could use it. So even though people say that it doesn't fit the criteria of the knife going into the radish, right? Normally we were talking about a meat knife going into the onion. Here we're talking about a parve knife, but you put pressure down on the cutting board. So the issue, does that sort of lift the blia from the cutting board? And so the Chochmah Sodom says yes. But other Achronim disagree with the Chochmah Sodom and hold that the cutting surface does not affect the Dover Charif at all. Therefore, if one cut an onion with a parve knife on a dairy cutting board, the onion remains parve. Okay, that's a very important halach. Rav Moshe Tuvia Dinkel writes in a sefer called Dover Charif. Can you imagine? There's a whole sefer just on this issue of Dover Charif, that Rav Yoshev rules leniently in such a case, though he recommends trying to be stringent l'chadchil. Yesh machronim shekasvu shebechituch Dover Charif yesh duch kalo rak l'gabi hasakin, el l'gabi hatzlachas hatzalachat alei hanechtach hamaych l'charif yesh duchka. Right? He's referring to the Chochmah Sodom. Sharei adi achituch nidchak b'hamaych l'charif al hatzalachas. There's pressure sort of on the plate. Ubi im hatzalachas b'sarit nasa maichel of sari, v'michalavit nasa maichel chalavi, uve'im hi shel isser nechel ha'maichel. Or, for example, if the plate was a treif plate, all the same cases. Lefichach roy lahakbid shechoitech maichel charif b'sakin b'sari, bein shu ben yomo, bein shenu ben yomo. So he says, if you're going to cut with a meat knife, whether it's ben yomo or not ben yomo, lo yichatchenu al tzalachas chalavit. So don't cut it on a milk plate. So, because remember, we were talking about using a parve knife on, let's say, a milk cutting board or meat cutting board. Here, he doesn't want you mixing the meat knife onto a milk cutting board. That, he says, is an issue. If you did it, it's permitted. Shein lesros hakelim, and you don't have to do agol of the kelim. Afilu shneim bnei yomam chenamachlen neser. The food's not osir, the dishes are not osir. It's fine. Remember, we're talking about using a meat knife, cutting a davar charif on a milk plate or a milk davar. So we're lenient regarding that. B'diavad nechtach b'sakin parv of salachas chalavidu psari. And again, the sakin, the knife remains parv. Shamati marav yoshev d'li'in l'chatchila yesh lachush lachoch b'sodom l'in di'evet tzarch lachush lesser akelim b'maychel. So he says, b'di'evet, if you did it, you don't have to ask for anything. L'chatchila, you should avoid it. Other practical questions that arise is where one cuts a davar charif, such as an onion, with a meat knife, and then mistakenly cook the onion with dairy. Is the entire food mixture prohibited b'di'evet? Although the issue is complex, and it depends on a number of factors, Rav Chaim Jakter, in the Sefer Davar Charif, presents a brief summary of some of the basic opinions. As a practicing rabbi will attest, questions regarding Davar Charif arise very often. The first is if any onion was cut by a clean Eino Ben Yomo knife, milk knife, right? So it's beyond 24 hours, and was subsequently cooked together with meat, do we say that this food is forbidden mixture of meat and milk? Rav Feivel Cohen, who is still alive, a contemporary of the Badei HaShulchan. The Badei HaShulchan is the main commentary we use today when we study these subject matters of a modern day posting. Cites two opinions regarding this issue. Two great achronim, the Chochmah Sodom and the Pri Megadim, rule that this food constitutes a forbidden mixture of milk and meat, must be discarded. However, the Beis Meir rules that three lenient opinions of the Rishonim may be combined to rule that this food is permitted. The opinion that only a radish has the rule of davar charif applied to it and not onion. That the rule of not bar not applies even by davar charif, right? That's the leniency of not bar not. We just ignore the fact that it's a davar charif, because some Rishonim hold like that. And that the rule of davar charif does not apply when the knife is Eino Ben Yomo. You got to consult your rabbi. He says it's commonly accepted to follow the more stringent opinions. However, where additional mitigating factors are relevant, like hefsid meruba, you're going to lose money. There may be room to, or it's a simcha. and you got so those are the reasons why a posek will be lenient. The second case is if an onion was cut by a meat or milk knife and was placed in a parv blender. Is the blender no longer parv? This is debated by the Achronim. The Mogen Avram argues that since the rule of Nat Bar Nat does not apply to Davar Charif, then a parv utensil that cut the onion, which is the food processor, and the onion was cut by a meat knife, so the food processor becomes meaty. But the Even HaOzer disagrees. He states that the parv utensil that cut an onion after it was cut by a meat knife remains parv because it's not bar nat. The Davar Charif itself is an exception to the rule of not bar nat, but not the utensil that absorbed the meat or milk taste. The Badei HaShulchan rules that in case of need, which is Hefsed Meruba, Shasat Chak, you have guests coming, one may rule leniently, in light of the fact that some Rishonim believe that the rule of not bar nat applies even to the Davar Charif itself. Okay, I think we covered very good this whole issue of Davar Charif and the knife. Any comments, any questions?
Yes, so the last part of the blender is interesting because most people don't have parv, melchik, or fleshik blenders. They generally have a blender, and most time people using blenders are using them for cold. But like I said, sometimes people put a blender, they might blend something that has onions in it, right? So I don't understand that last part over there.
No. So my wife does have parv blenders, the Cuisinart food processor.
Yeah.
So what they said here is, if we cut the onion with the meat knife, and now we threw the onion into the processor further, whether that makes the processor not parv anymore. According to the Badei HaShulchan, it remains parv. Yeah, you don't have to worry about that. Although you saw that there was one stringent opinion, he said halach l'maisa, if it's b'shas adchak, you can say that it stays parv.
But that's only the stringent opinion. We generally paskin in this case the kula in general for the blender.
He said in case of need. The Badei HaShulchan said in case of need you can rule leniently. Yeah, so it's not just, you wouldn't just do it. It would have to be like Hefsid Meruba, Shasat Chak, you have guests coming, it's before Shabbos, it's a bar mitzvah. You know what I'm saying? There's got to be a mitigating factor that the posek will take into account. He won't just matir. He'll say, do something he'll say you have, that he'll say lechatchila, the blender will become fleshik.
Lechatchila, but see, yeah. Even if you if you chop the onions first and then throw it in?
First of all, if you chop the onion dak, that we said that's worse, because then all the onion becomes a problem. It's also kulo. Remember that part? I said that if we cut an onion in half,
you're talking about chopping.
The only part that becomes milk is kedei natila. So if you remove kedei natila, the rest of the onion is perfectly good. But if you cut it dak into little pieces, it's also kulo. So that's going to be more problematic if you cut it into pieces.
The blender does that. It makes it even more than dak. So how does that blender remain parv?
No, so because he gave you the reason why it remained parv. Because some hold that not bar not even applies to Davar Charif. The leniency of not. Remember, the not bar not concept is it's a leniency.
No, I understand there's a leniency here.
But so we rely on the Rishonim that say Davar Charif is not bar not as well, and therefore the Hef said we don't treif up. We don't say that the blender loses its parv status. The Hef said. I mean, this is all the di'evid. That means you use the blender. Now you have guests coming, and the question is, is it going to become meat or not? He says no.
Yeah, and that's a b'di'evid. And then what happens?
But l'chatchila, the processor now is no longer parv and really is now a meaty. You would only be able to use the processor.
And the next time somebody comes in, the next time they use the blender, that blender is either milchik or fleshik.
So we know it becomes meat. If you cut the onion with a meat knife and you use the blender, then lechatchila we now treat the blender as a meat blender, and you cannot use milchik things in it, and you can't put parv things in it because the parv things will become meat unless it's not bar not at that point. You're not using onion, you're not using a davar charif. You could also put water in there.
What happens if you change the blade and the glass that does it in?
Yeah, I think the blade is going to be the issue if you. But that may be very complicated if you do that. I don't know if you can do that.
But Ernie, what you're saying is if you had water in the blender, right?
Because that's not barnat. That's what I'm saying. It depends what you use the blender for. It's only when you first cut the onion with a meat knife, so you made the onion meaty. And now the question came up, now when you put those onions in the Parv blender, did it change the blender? So according to the first opinion, yes, you changed it to a meaty blender. According to the Badei HaShulchan, you could be lenient if this was the Shas Atcha. That's how we ended up.
So we're saying, but most people don't put a straight onion in the blender. Usually they have other things already in the blender. And then you're adding.
But you see now you need shishim. It's not just if you had shishim against those little onions, then it wouldn't be a problem.
But I thought you said
not that clearly.
I thought you said if it's not enough, if you have other Parv things, you have tomato juice in there, for example.
No.
Right?
But remember, that's by cooking. The blender's not cooking anything. It's just we're saying that there's going to be the bliya because it's a davar charif, accepted the second cutting of the meat onion made the blender, because it's also a davar charif and it has a knife, it also made it fleshik as well, according to the opinion that there's no leniency of not barnat by davar charif. That's why they say the blender becomes meat. But according to the opinion, the Rishonim that say not barnat works by davar charif, that's why you can use b'shas adchak to say that it did not become fleshik.
So, but then to test ourselves, reverse. Let's say that you have that blender, and now you blend. You blend a milkshake in there, right? But that's completely cold.
Right.
It's not ben yomo, so then you wouldn't have.
Wouldn't be a problem then. It's only a problem in this case because the blades were cutting a davar charif, so you have the duchket, the sakin, and the charifus. Without that, you don't have the transfer of the bliya. Okay? Okay, let's go to page 187. This is going to be the concept of glut and not glut kosher meat, so everyone can finally understand really what the issues are. In addition to the rules of basar b'chol, keeping a kosher kitchen that we have learned about in the previous year, another important element of the laws of kashrus involves the preparation of kosher meat for consumption. Although today much of this process takes place in the slaughterhouse and does not involve the average consumer, in this year we will discuss one aspect of these halachot, somewhat more well known and important to understand, that of glut kosher meat. We will also discuss the preparation of liver for consumption, which differs somewhat from that of other meat, as well as some important issues related to the preparation and consumption of kosher fish. Kosher meat that is sold today can be classified in one of two ways: glut, which is smooth, and non-glut. What exactly do these terms mean? What is the basis for the difference between them? Let us begin by noting that in order for meat to be kosher, the animal must not contain any treifa, or defects or holes in its primary organ. This is based on the following pasuk in the Torah: V'anshe kodesh tiyun li, uvatsar basadeh treifa lo tochelu. The flesh of a treifa you should not eat. Makelav tashlichun oto. Although the Torah refers here specifically to an animal whose flesh was torn by a predator in the field, Chazal applied the disqualifications known as treifa to a wide range of defects in the animal's limbs, which are detailed in the Mishnah in the 3rd chapter of Masechta Chulin. The Mishnah says there are yud ches treifas. If you're missing an arm, if you're missing a leg, if you're missing the heart, if you're missing the spleen, it goes through the various organs or if there's a defect, if there's a hole in the stomach, if there's a hole in the heart, if there's a hole in the membranes covering the brain. We spent a few months in the Daf Yomi learning Chulin, the Yud Ches treifas. Most treifas do not occur commonly, and therefore there's no obligation to inspect the animal and search for them. We use the principle, gentlemen, of rov. Rov animals don't have these trephis, and therefore there's no special rule that after shechita you have to check the animal for all the various yudches trephis. This is based on the principle following the majority mentioned in Chulin. Tzurba M'Rabanan Zilba Saruva. Where is this concept of going after Rav? Frag the Gemara Minola. What do you mean from where? Dichsiv achrei rabim lahatos. The Torah says we go after the majority. So now the Gemara analyzes. Ruba de Issachamon. There is a concept that there's a majority that we can mamish quantify in front of us. Kigon, the famous case, Tes Chanuyos, the case where there's 9 kosher butcher shops and 1 non-kosher butcher shop, and you find a piece of meat outside, not inside one of the stores. So the din is called a parish, meruba parish. Anything that's been separated, it's been separated from the majority. So since there are 9 kosher butchers and only 1 treif one, we assume that the piece of meat is kosher. Now there's other dinim that apply. Basar shenisalim in the ayin. If anybody took their eye off the meat, it's not kosher. But in Me'ikar Adin, that piece of meat is kosher because of Rov. The other place that we see Rov is Sanhedrin, right? There were 70 people in the Sanhedrin. They voted 36 to 34, and there was a majority. That's a ruba that's Issa Kamon. Lokamaboyla. That's no. We didn't ask the shaila. Where did we? That's where the Gemara asked the question. Where do we see the concept of rov? We're not talking about that kind of rov. Rov she'isla kamon, that we understand. We want to know kikam aboilo and ruba de lesa kamon. What I would call a statistical rov, a rov that, in general, it's not in front of us. Ravacha Yaakov Amar, Osir misar mishtalech. We learn out a rov that is not clearly in front of us from the concept of the Sa'ir La'azaz on Yom Kippur, right? We were told to take 2 goats, and we made a lottery. One of them went as a korban Lashem, and one of them was thrown off the cliff as the Sa'ir La'azaz. So, Yisrael Mishra, the Rachmana Amar v'lo kachashnei asirim. Shiyu shneim shavim. Now, the goats that you chose, the 2 have to be similar. Now, why don't we worry? Maybe, we don't know, maybe one of their internal organs has a treifa in it. Maybe there should, but we don't, because the goat that we throw off the cliff, it gets geschmattered in thousands of pieces. You can never recover it and do a post-mortem and determine for sure that there wasn't a treifa. The fact that the Torah allows us to do that, even though there's a drasha that they have to be exactly equal, most goats are not a treifa. We rely on the rov to be able to do the avodas of Yom Kippur. That's the raya of rov shelesa lekamon. Although the conclusion of this passage appears to show that's assumed that most animals are not treifas, Rashi points out that punctures in the lung are much more common than the other types of treifas. And for this reason, we must inspect the animal for this defect following slaughter. Says Rashi in Chulin, v'ahom milsa samchinon v'lo badkinon kol yitchas treifas. That which we rely on and don't check, that's for the yitchas treifas. Hole in the heart, all these are the hole in the membranes of the brain, all the various yitchas treifas. But the kuvas hareya, a hole in the lung, because the deficiency there is common enough that we have to check. So the Mishnah, the 3rd chapter of Chulin, mentions this type of treifa of a hole or puncture in the lung within the bigger list of the Yudches treifas. Elu treifas b'be'ema. One of them is hareya shenikva shechasra, a lung that had a hole or that was missing a defect. That it's got to be a hole through and through to the bronchus. The bronchus is the breathing tube that delivers air to the lung. Now, the Bartanura, on his commentary on the Mishnah, elaborates on this defect. Hareya shenikva, shnei krumim dakim yesh l'reya. So, let me give a medical background. Almost every organ in the body lives within a sac. So, for example, our intestines we have something called the peritoneal cavity. There's a sac, but then there's an inner layer of the sac that wraps itself around all the intestines. So to mamish actually perfect the intestines, you got to go through the external layer, and then there's a layer directly on the intestines. Let me tell you about the testicle. The testicle also has a sac, and it's got a tunica. There's a visceral layer and a parietal layer. And there's like 2 or 3 cc's of fluid in between. So the testicle floats around in the scrotum like a ball bearing because of that sac. Now, one layer of that sac makes the fluid, the other layer absorbs it. So there's a steady state. So that's why our testicular size stays the same. But there's a defect. Sometimes people get an infection or sometimes we don't even know the cause. One layer makes the fluid, the other layer doesn't absorb it. You get a hydrocele. You get a water sac. So you get a big sac of water in front of the testicle. Guys come in with a testicle this big. We do a little surgery. We open up the sac. We drain the fluid and we wrap the sac around it so it doesn't reform. The lung has the same kind of thing. There's a parietal layer of the pleura and there's a visceral layer of the pleura. And there's a few cc's of fluid. So, and that sac creates negative pressure. So if God forbid somebody had a stab wound through their rib and punctured only the external sac, not the internal sac that's lying on top of the lung itself, so you would get what's called a pneumothorax. Air would rush in, and we'd have to put a tube in to drain that air. But you wouldn't have a hole in your lung. That would not make you a treifa. Now, if the knife went all the way through to the outer sac and through the inner sac and into the lung tissue itself, that's what they're talking about, a nekev in the lung. So, and that's what the Bartanura is talking about. The Bartanura lived 200 years ago, but they did dissections of organs after an animal was shechted. They also knew the anatomy, and they knew shnei krumim dakim yesh l'reya. He's talking about these 2 thin layers of the outer layer and the inner layer. Nikiv zebelo zek shera, like what I just described. If you have a stab wound, you just puncture the outer layer. Yeah, air will rush in, and your lung can collapse, but you haven't damaged the lung itself. So, for example, if you put a breathing tube down the person's trachea and you blew air, the lung would expand. On the other hand, if there was a hole through and through, the lung wouldn't expand. It would blow out the hole. You'd see air bubbling out right through there. So, nikvu shneim v'aruach yotzek shenochim osa. And if you blow into the stem, the bronchus of the lung, and you see air coming out of it, treifa. Umitam reish nikva nesru kol achsirchos shebereya kshe b'mokom davidi liantuki. Now, when they did the shechita, and they now look into the chest cavity, they see what's called adhesions, like scar tissue between this layer of the sac and the chest wall. Now, you don't get an adhesion unless there was some kind of injury there. Now, not every one of those adhesions represents a hole in the lung. But they're concerned. When you see an adhesion, if it's an occur in a place where the lung will be detached, there we have to assume that there was a perforation. The lung has all sorts of fluid in it. It becomes thick. The fluid comes out through the hole. The nikva becomes a membrane there. Now, if the adhesion occurred, let's say not necessarily where it has to be a perforation, but it could be between, let's say, one lobe and another lobe. Una be'una, considering zemegina, one will protect the other. The chozeret, and it can heal. The aim hanekev mizgale, and that would be a kosher nekev. So, but if it's in a different location, not between the lobes, then when you move the adhesion, you'll see the hole in the lung. Or, for example, you're missing one of the whole lobes. So it's noted by the Batanur. Sometimes there's no puncture or hole readily noticeable in the animal's lung, but there's a sircha, which is an adhesion. It's a scar tissue between the lung and the chest wall. Such a lesion is a potential sign that there was a puncture nearby that was then removed. We don't dispute the exact problem of the sircha. Rashi explains in the context of the Gemara below. Omer Rava, Hani Tarti Uni Desrichin Ladodi. You have two lobes that are connected to each other. Less lahu bedika. You don't need to check them. We assume, Rashi says, that this is going to be a treifa because that's why they came together. But that's only adhesions when one lobe is adhered to a lobe not next to it, far away. But if it's adhered next to two lobes next to each other, consider that's how they grow. Look at the picture on the next page, 191. See, you have one lobe, two lobes, three lobes on one side and two lobes on the other. So that's what he's talking about. If the two lobes next to each other are stuck, that's not necessarily a sign that there was a sircha there, that there's an important sircha. It's only if there's a lung that is crossed over and is attached to, let's say, a lung that's not necessarily next to it, then it's going to cause a problem. Okay, I think that's a good introduction. We'll go into it more next week. Continue this discussion of glatt kosher meat. We'll talk about glatt kosher kittens and chicken. What does that even mean? How to kosher liver, how to kosher fish. Any comments, questions, ha'aros, or any other things that you want to say before Yom Tov, besides good Yom Tov?